Hello and welcome to this screencast where we will be talking about cost sheets and cash flow projections. We'll be looking at what they are, what the difference is between the two, and also looking at some examples that will show you how to actually create these. So let's start off with talking about cost sheets. Cost sheets are very much focused on one project or product. And it helps you to keep track of the financials for that project. So this is where you'll track your total costs. So that can be things like materials, also your time, perhaps you need some equipment, perhaps there's shipping involved, and so on. What your costs are really are very dependent on the context of that project or product. So yes, basically a cost sheet in a nutshell is where you will keep track of your ingoing and outgoing monies for a particular project or product, and that will allow you to see whether it's actually going to be profitable for you. It's also a good place to start when you're actually costing up your work in order to give quotes to a client. Sometimes it might be relevant to actually share the cost sheet with your client. Sometimes the cost sheet can also be called a budget, whereas other times it's just really more for your own benefit to make sure that you are completely on top of what outgoings you have, and that matches up with the incoming monies you've got from the client to make sure that this project is profitable. So what about cash flow projections? They are quite different from a cost sheet in that they track your incoming and outgoing monies over time. So in reality, you may well be working on more than one project at the same time, depending on what you do, of course. So a cash flow projection is where you can actually track how much money you've got incoming each month, and balance that against all your outgoing costs, which are probably likely to be fairly similar each month, but there are also some variable costs that may well be different. So if you imagine your business as a body, a cash flow projection is really the heart that keeps the blood pumping around that body. It also acts as an early warning system. So a well-done cash flow will actually warn you when there is a cash flow crisis on the horizon, and knowing that in advance will allow you to take action to avoid it. So if you can see, for example, in a couple of months' time that you are going to potentially be going into the red, as in not enough money in the account, then you will be able to go out and actively look for more work, or develop other strategies for how you're actually going to deal with this. Before we move on, I'd like to take a moment to just talk about the concept of profit. There can sometimes be a little bit of a tendency in the creative industries to look at profits as something almost embarrassing, perhaps something that belongs more in the corporate sector than in creative industries, and something that you don't want anything to do with. If that sounds like you, try to think of profit as, well, basically how you're going to live, how you're going to pay your wages, and how you're actually going to keep your business going. We all need to live, eat, and have a roof over our heads, so profit is not embarrassing. It's actually the opposite of loss, and obviously if you're working at a loss, then you're not going to be able to continue trading. Okay, so all that said, let's now turn to look at some examples of cost sheets. So here we are in Excel. You can use other applications to do your cost sheets. For example, on Mac, you may find that using numbers is better if you don't have Excel for Mac. But you do need some sort of spreadsheet-like software to do this. I find that Excel serves the needs for me very well, but obviously it's very much up to you what you prefer. Okay, so here we are, and we've got an example of a cost sheet, and this is for a project where the client is a creative cafe in London, the Drink Shop Do Cafe, and the supplier is Curious Ceramics in London. So this is a small ceramics studio basically who provides sort of bespoke commissions. As you can see here, there are various subcategories. So we've got labour, materials, firings and shipping. Obviously this is very much in the context of what this project is about, which is to produce 15 mugs and 15 bowls for this cafe. So as you can see here, this person has split the cost down into how many hours it's going to take them, and then that's kind of totaled into the total cost for that item. So this person has estimated that each mug will take 40 minutes to do in total, and there are 15 all in all, which then amounts to 10 hours, and that at £25 per hour amounts to 250. And you can see the same sort of formula happening here. In terms of materials, it's very good to be completely transparent about what it is you are using. So under clay here, this person shows that they need 12.3 kilos, and that amounts to a cost of whatever this may be, and so on for the other items. Here we've got some subtotals, and I just wanted to show you quite a useful little thing if you are not familiar with Excel. And as you can see here, this cell here is the sum of these cells here, and that basically is quite a simple formula of equal sum, open bracket, and then you simply highlight the cells that you want to total up, close the bracket and just press enter, and then you end up with the sum. And what that does mean is that you can change the figures in here. So for example, if you see here, if I change this 299 to 399, you will see that the total changes here. So let's just change this back. Okay, those are the subtotals. You can also see there's shipping here, and then you've got an overall subtotal, and again here this is a sum. So you can use this a similar formula to this, where you go equal sum, and then you open brackets, and then you just highlight the first cell you want to include. Then you press down Control or Command depending on whether you're on a Windows or Mac based computer, and then you simply highlight the other cells. So that's where you can highlight all the subtotals, and that will then give you the overall subtotal. This person here has also included a contingency for unexpected circumstances of 10%. That will basically help you in case there are any unexpected circumstances. That can be, for example, they're needing to get more materials, perhaps something breaks and you need to do it again, and so on. So, and as you can see here, this is now the sum of the subtotal and the contingency. Over here, this person has decided to give quite a clear breakdown of the time. So the whole process has been broken down into the design, the making, the glazing, and the finishing of these products. So these are the amount of hours, and we remember over here that it's £25 per hour, and then the totals here, and again using these sums for auto sums. Okay, so hopefully that should all make good sense. One thing on currency, whatever currency you're working in, it is good practice to show that explicitly in the heading of the column. So that means you don't actually have to put the currency signs in front of each total or amount, and that will also allow the formulas to work. Okay, let's jump over and have a look at a different example. So this is an example for a wayfinding system design for the University of Seville. So that's basically the signs that you would see within the university to show you where you're going, whether you're looking for the library or the canteen or whatever it may be. So here we see that for this project, the person has decided to put in the names of the project design manager and the junior icon designer, and they've also decided to make it quite clear what the hourly rates of these two people are. So you can see that Sophia is a bit more experienced, so her rate is €30 per hour, and Emma is perhaps a little bit less experienced. She's the junior designer, and she is charged out at €20 per hour. It's really a good idea to be as clear as you can, both for your own sake and also in case you do want to share this budget or cost sheet with the client. Okay, so as you can see here, in this case, the cost sheet has been broken down into the different stages of the project. So we've got the design stage, the project management and installation stage, the production stage, and then we've got a summary over here. So let's have a little look. you can see here the time is broken down, and it's quite clear how these amounts have been reached. So the research stage, 16 hours at 30 euros. And here is another new little formula that we haven't seen before. So basically this takes the amount of hours, and then it uses the little asterisk, which is the times symbol in Excel formulas, and then it highlights the next cell, which is the cost per hour, and then you reach the total cost for 16 hours at 30 euros per hour, which is 480. So as you can see, it's quite a good idea to actually invest the time in learning these formulas, because as you go forward you'll just be able to plug in new numbers and use this for different projects, and you'll save a lot of time that way. This then continues as per above for the different stages of the design stage. You can also see here that this person is being quite clear about how many revisions are included in the price, which is a good idea, because you don't want to get into a position where the project scope gets out of hand. We've got a subtotal here. Again, as mentioned before, this is a total of these sums here. Then we jump on to the next stage, and she is using colour here to actually make it quite clear which stage we're at, and that carries over into the summary. I'm just going to scroll over here so you can actually see what's happening here. So the production stage is a little bit different in that we're actually looking at materials here. So you got different types of signage here. So one is the semicircle wood panel at this particular size. There are 3 of them, and each one costs 70 euros, and that is then the total. So this number times the cost, which then gives us the total cost. Let's just come out of that. Okay, same here. So as you can see, it's being very, very transparent about what is happening. And again, here we can see they've included a contingency of 10% in case anything goes wrong with the materials and so on. And then we've got the overall total. Then the summary down here, and let's just go back so we can see the whole thing. So the summary, as you can see, the colours quite clearly refer back to what stage we're working at here. And then the overall total is 10,837 euros. So yeah, that's basically it. So it's really up to you how you decide to create your cost sheet. As long as it's clear, create a template that works for you, something that makes sense for you, but just really try and look at it from the perspective of somebody who doesn't know your project. Don't assume that people will know what you mean unless you make it absolutely clear. Next up, let's look at cash flow projections. And I'm just going to jump over to a couple of examples I've prepared. So here we are in a cash flow projection for a graphic designer. He's a freelancer working from home and operating as a sole trader. As we talked about in the introduction, a cash flow projection, it tracks financials over time. So you see here that we have April, May, June, July. For the purposes of this course, we'll be asking you to complete a cash flow projection for 3 months. However, in real life, it is good practice to have a projection lasting a whole year, so you can actually see the very long-term forecast. You will always have an opening balance, and you'll always have a closing balance. Within that, you have a section for income, total for income, a section for outgoings or expenses, and a total for outgoings. And as you'll see here, the total closing balance is the opening balance plus the total money in minus the total money out. So you can see there's a little formula up here, which is similar to what we had in the cost sheet. Okay, so the closing balance of April will become the opening balance of May, and I'll show you a little formula here which allows you to carry over a balance from one cell to another. All you do is go in the cell where you want the amount to appear, go equal sum, open brackets, and then you simply highlight the cell that you want to carry over, as you can see here, and then you close brackets, and that then becomes this cell here. So quite easy and worth it to not have to keep updating cells all the time. So let's have a look at what really happened here for this guy. So he starts off with £700. That may be some savings that he had, or perhaps somebody lent him some money. Let's say it's savings. And he has some quite healthy client work going on here. So all in all, his total money in is £2,250. He's decided that he needs to have £1,300 a month to live on. And then he needs, in his capacity as a graphic designer, the Adobe Creative Suite. He needs some internet, of course, and his phone, insurance, and various other things here. Yes, so let's see what happened in May. Not such a good month on the client work front. Only £800. Perhaps he was so busy in April doing all of this client work here that he didn't think ahead, which is something that can happen quite easily and worth keeping in mind. Plan ahead. So as you can see, only £800 incoming. Still paying himself £1,300. Still got outgoings, plus this £800 here. So what happened was that his laptop died on him. And that can happen. Unexpected circumstances do happen. Not necessarily your laptop dying, but it could be something else. And this is where cash flow projection can be a very powerful tool in helping you recover from that and to develop strategies for how you're going to do that. So you can see his outgoings in May are significantly higher than his income. That means that he's losing this healthy buffer zone and he's ending up with only £10 and 2 pence, which is then carried over to the beginning of June. Doing a little bit better here on client work, and he's also realised that he needs to do something to recover from this £800 down here for the laptop. So he's asked for some part-time work, which he gets, and that's £300. So his incomings are not great, but a little bit better at least than May. He's realised that maybe he's actually paying himself a little bit too much. Maybe he needs to tighten the belt just for a bit. So he's paying himself £1,200. The other outgoings are still similar. His travel was a little bit higher because he's actually having to go out and proactively meet with potential clients to try and build up his client base. Okay, so his total money out is still somewhat higher than his income. So that means he's now into the red, as you can see here. Not a good place to be. That is carried over to July. He now knows he needs to do something relatively drastic. So he's asked for double the hours in his part-time job, and he's doing a little bit better on client work here. So his total income is £1,500, which is higher than his total money out. However, he needs to take into account this minus balance that is obviously affecting his total monies in. So overall, he ends up with £10 and 4 pence. Once he extends this cash flow projection to become a whole year, he is actually able to input strategies for how to make up for this. He has this sort of yearly tracker over here where he tracks how much he's paying himself. He's using this formula where he actually carries over the amount from one cell to another, as you can see here. And what that does is it allows him to measure his income against the yearly tax-free allowance in the UK, which is £1,150. And depending on when you're watching this video, you will need to double check that figure because it will change. And then he can actually work out how much he's taken as personal income and track it against that. Before we move on, I've just realised one thing here, which some of you may have seen as we were going through, that there is a little bit of a discrepancy between the comma divider here. So I'm just going to show you how to change that. So if you highlight a whole column and then you right click and then you go into format cells and then you go into number and then you can go into use the thousand separator if that's what you want to do, and that's what I'll go for here. So as you can see, that now aligns nicely. I'm just going to update the rest of the sheet as well. So format cells, go into number, use the 1000 separator, and I'm going to do the same over here. So this is mainly for those of you who are not that experienced in Excel. Okay, let's jump over to a different example now. So here we are in a cash flow projection for the pottery maker that we also looked at in the cost sheet section of this screencast. Another sole trader, but this one she's actually working in shared studio space. Again, we have an opening balance here. She's starting off with 0. And she's got various commissions here. She's got a commission that occurs every second month, which is great. That is one of the holy grails of working freelance or working for yourself, is to have regular client work, so you have something to fall back on. And then you can then complement that with more sort of ad hoc commissions, as you can see here. So it's the same structure as the previous one we looked at. But as you can see here, she's got a fair amount of outgoings. So she has decided she needs £1,200 a month to live on. And then the studio fee for the shared studio is £200 a month. And because she's just starting out, she needs to pay a deposit of £300. But that's just a one-off. She's got quite a bit of work on, so she needs to spend £65 on kiln firing and then various other outgoings, as you can see here. And feel free at any point to actually pause this video to look at the detail. She also needs to buy some equipment and tools because she is just starting out, and she needs to spend some money on materials and shipping, travel, and she doesn't feel that confident with numbers, so she's actually deciding to take on an accountant, which works out at about £20 a month for her. So if you are going to look at getting an accountant, it's definitely worth getting recommendations and also to shop around for the best price. So as you can see here, for that first month of April, she's got significantly higher outgoings than income. So that means she's in the red here, nearly £900, which is carried over to May. So she needs to do something. So she's actually gone out and asked for a loan. She's also got some hours of tutoring, which is quite ad hoc. So as you can see, she's upped her income, or incoming rather, by quite a bit. But £1,500 of that is this loan that we talked about. Her outgoings are significantly lower, partly due because she doesn't have to pay this deposit, and also she doesn't have to spend money on equipment and tools this month. So she's back out of the red, which is great. That's then carried over here, and I'm just going to change this because this shouldn't be red. So June starts off just back in the plus, and as you can see here, she's got even more hours tutoring this month while she works on getting more clients. Again, she's still paying herself £1,200, and her outgoings are still relatively low, a little bit higher on materials, and she's actually starting to repay the loan that she took the months before, so that's £120. So as you can see here, her incoming and her outgoing is pretty much level now, which will work for her. So as you can see, the closing balance for June is £81.95. So she now knows that she has to have an income of this amount or more, ideally more, to not be so precarious. And this is really where the power of the cash flow projection comes in. She's made a note down here that she has this loan, so she doesn't forget. And also as she expands this cash flow projection to go over further months, ideally up to a year, then she will be able to put in her expenses and so on and track it even further. And then she has this little box here where once she exceeds her yearly tax-free allowance, then she needs to account for what the tax rate is, and then also her national insurance contributions. But we won't go into that now because on the course you'll be researching this stuff yourselves. This concludes this screencast on cost sheets and cash flow projections. You should now have a much better understanding of why they're important and how to create them. Now is a good time to have a go for yourself. Thank you.